The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon and freshly brewed coffee. Ava stirred the pot absently, her eyes flickering toward the wall clock. 7:42 p.m. Liam was late again. She glanced at the neatly set dining table, where 2 plates of still warm pasta waited in silence. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows on the white linen, dancing around an emptiness she refused to name. Ava tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, forcing a smile at herself in the reflection of the microwave door. Maybe he got stuck in traffic, she murmured, though she'd said the same thing 3 nights in a row. Their apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Even the hum of the refrigerator felt like a reminder of how still everything had become. She poured herself a glass of water and sat, her eyes lingering on her phone screen. No missed calls. No new messages. She scrolled through their old photos, Liam laughing at the beach, holding her hand under fairy lights at their wedding reception. Moments that once felt like foundations now seemed like fading echoes. When the door finally opened, she stood quickly. "Hey," Liam said, tossing his keys in the bowl by the door. He looked tired, or maybe just attached. "I made dinner," she offered, her voice hopeful.
Sorry.
"I grabbed something on the way." He walked past her, loosening his tie. "Long day. Just want a shower." Ava's smile faltered. "You didn't even text." Liam paused at the hallway. Didn't think it mattered. Those 4 words struck harder than he knew. She sat back down, staring at her untouched food. It wasn't the pasta that had gone cold. It was something deeper, harder to reheat. The next morning, she woke up alone in bed. Liam had already left, his side of the bed barely disturbed. She reached out and touched the cool sheets, wondering when they'd stop meeting in the middle. Later that day, Ava met Clara at their usual cafe. Clara, with her usual sparkle, slid into the booth with a grin. "You look tired," Clara said, sipping her latte. "Just a lot on my mind," Ava replied. Clara leaned in. "Everything okay with Liam?" Ava hesitated. "He's been distant. I don't know, distracted. He's probably just stressed. Corporate life eats people alive." Clara waved it off with a smile. "You're probably overthinking it." Ava nodded slowly. Maybe Clara was right. Maybe she was overthinking. But something didn't sit right. It wasn't just Liam's distance. It was his absence, even when he was right next to her. That evening, Ava decided to try again. She lit candles, played soft jazz, and changed into the dress Liam used to say made her look like the night sky. She cooked his favorite, creamy garlic chicken, and waited. But when he came home, he didn't even notice. He mumbled something about work calls, kissed her on the forehead like a stranger, and went straight to his laptop. She watched him from the doorway, the flicker of his screen lighting up his face. He wasn't angry or cruel, just unreachable. It was almost worse. As she turned to blow out the candles, her gaze caught the collar of his shirt draped over the armchair. A faint smudge of red near the edge stopped her. Lipstick? She picked it up, heart racing. It was faint, but unmistakable. When she showed it to him, Liam barely blinked. "Client hugged me at the bar." "Probably her makeup," he shrugged. Ava stared at him. "You don't even drink." He smiled thinly. "I had a Coke." "You're reading too much into things." She wanted to believe him.
She needed to.
So she nodded, folded the shirt, and walked away. But later that night, she sat by the window, writing in her journal. "It's not the lipstick that hurts. It's how easily he lies now. Like love is disposable. Like I'm disposable." The streetlights outside flickered, casting fractured shadows across the floor. Ava hugged her knees to her chest, listening to the silence that had become her constant companion. And somewhere deep in her chest, a quiet truth began to stir. Something was breaking. Not fast, but surely. Not loud, but deeply. Still, she clung to hope. Because sometimes, love doesn't shatter all at once. Sometimes, it fades quietly until there's nothing left to hold on to. The next few days passed like fog, thick, heavy, and disorienting. Ava floated through her routine, performing tasks with practiced precision, but her mind kept looping back to that faint lipstick stain. It had lodged itself in her thoughts like a thorn, small but impossible to ignore. Liam remained unchanged, calm, distant, unavailable. He still smiled occasionally, kissed her on the forehead like a habit, and retreated to his world of late meetings and vague explanations. The warmth between them, once effortless, now felt rehearsed. On Thursday afternoon, Ava decided to clean the bedroom. Maybe distraction would soothe the ache she couldn't name. She dusted, folded clothes, organized drawers. When she reached the top shelf of the wardrobe, she found a small black pouch she didn't recognize. Curious, she pulled it down and unzipped it. A phone. Not his usual one. This was older, slightly scratched, but clearly in use. Her pulse quickened. She pressed the power button. It lit up immediately. No password. Her hands trembled as the screen unlocked. There were messages, hundreds of them. Ava scrolled, heart pounding, through a flood of intimate words, inside jokes, and midnight confessions. Her eyes scanned the contact name. C. Her breath caught.
Clara. No. It couldn't be.
Not Clara. But there it was. Photo messages of Clara in her bathroom mirror, audio clips of her giggling, voice notes that started with "Hey baby" and ended with kisses sent through sound. Ava's fingers went cold. Each message was a dagger. Each emoji, a betrayal. They had private nicknames. They'd met at hotels she didn't recognize.
There were plans for the weekend.
There were memories, new ones, not hers. She felt her knees weaken and sank onto the bed, the phone still clutched in her hand. It wasn't just the infidelity, it was who? Her best friend. The one she had confided in. The one who told her she was overthinking things. Her mind reeled with fragmented flashbacks. Clara laughing too hard at Liam's jokes, their brief glances at dinner parties, her sudden interest in Liam's work trips. The signs had been there, camouflaged in trust. Ava stared at the phone, tears streaking her cheeks silently. Her throat burned, but she couldn't scream. There was no sound strong enough to match what she felt. She didn't confront him.
Not yet.
Instead, she locked herself in the bathroom and let herself collapse, on the cold tiles, shaking, whispering questions into the void. Why Clara? When did it begin? Was anything ever real? Later that night, Liam returned home humming softly, oblivious. Ava sat on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, the phone hidden in her lap. The city lights blurred behind her tears. She didn't move, didn't speak. She just watched him through the glass door, calmly pouring himself a drink, checking emails, as if he hadn't just shattered her world without even knowing. That night, she didn't sleep. She didn't cry either. Grief had numbed her senses. She just stared at the ceiling, listening to Liam's steady breathing beside her, so close, yet entirely unreachable. By morning, she packed a small bag. No explanation. No drama. Just silence. She walked past Liam, who was still half asleep, and left. Hours later, she sat on a bench at the park where they once used to picnic. She watched a couple laughing nearby, hands entwined, eyes locked. She remembered how Liam used to look at her like that. She pulled out her journal and wrote, "I believed love was enough. But love doesn't compete with betrayal. Love doesn't survive in lies. And trust, once fractured, never returns whole." As dusk settled, she walked aimlessly, her steps guided more by instinct than intention. Her phone buzzed. A message from Liam. "Where are you? Are you okay?" She stared at the screen. For the first time in days, she didn't feel pain, just clarity. Something had ended. Not in a crash. Not in an explosion. But in a quiet unraveling. And yet, something else had begun. Not healing. Not yet. But the awakening before it. The apartment door creaked open just past sunset. Ava stepped inside, the air heavy with stillness. Liam looked up from the couch, startled. "You're back," he said, standing quickly. "Where did you go?" "I was worried." Ava placed her bag quietly by the door and removed her coat with slow precision. "I needed space," she said, her tone measured. "You could have said something," he replied, softening his voice. "I thought something had happened." She turned toward him, eyes steady, expression unreadable. "Something did happen, Liam." Confusion flickered across his face. "What do you mean?" She reached into her purse and retrieved the second phone, the one he thought was hidden. She placed it on the coffee table with finality. Liam's face drained of color. "I found it while cleaning," she said, voice even. "At first, I didn't want to look, but curiosity became necessity." He stared at the phone, hands clenched at his sides. "Ava, I can explain." "No," she interrupted. "You can't. Because there is no explanation that will make betrayal sound like love." Liam stepped forward, his voice strained. "It didn't mean anything. It was just a mistake, something that got out of control." She laughed softly, bitterly. "A mistake?" Repeated hotel bookings, secret messages, intimate voice notes. Those aren't mistakes. They're choices. And you made them. Repeatedly. He rubbed his temples. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Clara and I." "Clara," she said sharply, the name now like glass on her tongue. "Do you even hear yourself?" "My best friend, Liam." "She was there," he said defensively. "You were always busy or distant. Things changed between us." Her eyes narrowed.
"No. You changed."
"And don't you dare blame your affair on me trying to keep this marriage breathing while you were already walking away." His silence screamed louder than words. "I wanted to believe we could fix this," she said, her voice cracking for the first time. "I tried to love you louder than your distance. But love isn't a rescue mission." Liam moved closer, his expression softening. "I still love you, Ava." She looked at him, her face unreadable.
"No."
"You love convenience. You love comfort. But love doesn't lie." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away.
"Don't," she said. "Not now.
"Not after everything." She turned and walked to the bedroom, the weight of finality pressing on every step. She opened her wardrobe, pulling out a few more things, essentials, nothing sentimental. Liam followed her. "You're really leaving?" She paused, glancing at him over her shoulder. "You left first, Liam. I'm just catching up." There was no shouting, no dramatic explosion, just the quiet heartbreak of two people standing in the ruins of something they once called home. Later that evening, Ava sat across from Clara in a cafe. The confrontation felt inevitable. Clara looked nervous, her fingers fumbling with her coffee cup. "I didn't expect you'd want to see me." "I needed to look you in the eye," Ava replied calmly, "to see if guilt lives there." Clara's eyes flickered. "Ava, I never meant for it to go that far. It just happened. You know how lonely I've been." Ava's mouth twitched in disbelief. "Don't turn my story into yours." "I didn't plan it," Clara insisted. "But Liam, he made me feel seen." Ava's eyes darkened. "He was my husband, Clara. You were my friend." "I'm sorry," Clara whispered, eyes glistening. "Sorry doesn't undo betrayal," Ava said. "You didn't just steal moments, you shattered trust." Clara leaned forward. "Are you leaving him?" Ava leaned back in her chair. "I already have. You both deserve each other." Clara blinked, surprised by Ava's composure. "But here's the difference," Ava added. "I'll heal. You'll always know what you ruined." She stood, leaving her untouched coffee behind. That night, Ava returned to a quiet apartment. Liam was sitting on the couch, holding a photo from their wedding day. He looked up when she entered, hope flickering briefly in his eyes. "I was thinking maybe we could talk. Try to figure this out." Ava walked past him, straight to her journal. She didn't answer. Because some questions aren't meant to be answered. Some endings don't need closure. Just space. And silence. And strength to never return. Ava woke to the sound of birdsong and sunlight slipping through sheer curtains. The apartment felt different now, still quiet, but no longer suffocating. For the first time in weeks, the silence didn't feel like a weight. It felt like permission. She stood by the window, watching the city stretch into morning. Her wedding ring lay on the nightstand, untouched. There was no ceremony to her decision, just clarity. Some endings don't come with thunder. They arrive like a breath finally exhaled. Downstairs, Liam's side of the closet stood half empty. She had asked him to move out the night before, and he hadn't resisted. No pleading. No promises. Just a hollow nod and a defeated okay. Ava didn't cry. Not anymore. Later that afternoon, she visited her sister, Elise, someone she hadn't spoken to in weeks. They sat on a rooftop terrace, coffee in hand, the city humming softly beneath them. "You look lighter," Elise observed, watching her carefully. "I feel untethered," Ava replied. "Like I've just stepped out of someone else's story." Elise smiled gently. "Maybe now, you can write your own." Ava looked at her sister, grateful for the simplicity of the moment. No analysis. No pity. Just presence. It was something she hadn't realized she'd missed, being seen without being examined. Over the following days, Ava began reclaiming spaces once filled with shadows. She rearranged furniture, donated clothes, repainted the bedroom a warm shade of sage green. It wasn't about forgetting Liam, it was about removing the silence he left behind. In the evenings, she walked by herself through the park, sometimes with headphones, sometimes just listening to the rhythm of her steps. The ache hadn't vanished, but it had softened, like a bruise slowly healing beneath the surface. She still carried questions, but they no longer clawed at her. One afternoon, she passed a small bookstore she used to love but hadn't visited in years. On a whim, she walked in, the scent of old paper and ink wrapped around her like a memory. She picked up a novel from the display table, a story about a woman who loses everything only to find herself again. She bought it. That night, curled on the couch, reading beneath a blanket, Ava felt something unfamiliar, peace. Not happiness, not yet, but peace, gentle and quiet, resting in her chest like a seed waiting to grow. A few days later, a message arrived from Liam. "I miss you. I've been thinking about us. About everything. Can we talk?" Ava stared at the screen, then set the phone down without replying. Some conversations don't deserve reopening. Some wounds, if prodded, only delay the healing. Instead, she spent the evening journaling, writing words that felt like closure. There's power in choosing yourself. In walking away not because you hate someone, but because you love yourself enough to stop bleeding for them. The next morning, she met a new tenant who had just moved into her building. His name was Ethan, a quiet, soft-spoken man who complimented her on the flowers in her window box. They chatted briefly, small talk about books and weather, nothing more. But when she returned upstairs, she caught herself smiling. Not because she felt a spark, but because she felt open again. Open to life, to chance, to the simple act of noticing beauty without needing to cling to it. Days turned into weeks. Ava grew stronger, not in dramatic leaps, but in subtle, steady strides. She stopped checking her phone for messages that never came. She started cooking meals just for herself, lighting candles even when she dined alone. She rediscovered parts of herself that had gone quiet, her love for painting, her fascination with poetry, the way her laughter used to sound before it was muted by disappointment. One evening, while flipping through her old journals, she found a page from the early days of her marriage. It read, "I hope we never forget how lucky we are to have each other." She traced the words with her fingertips, then closed the book gently. Some hopes are meant to fade. Some promises are meant to teach, not endure. Ava stood by the window again, watching the city settle into night. This time, she didn't feel loss. She felt freedom, because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering who you were before the hurt and deciding to become even more